And at 10, Purple Guy. We know that William Afton is the infamous purple guy who was introduced in Fnaf 2 and has subsequently appeared in almost every Fnaf game, with the exception of 4 and 5. We know that William is the one we know as Purple Guy thanks to originally Matt, Pat, and Game Theory, who suggested that the name William Afton that had appeared in the Silver Eyes novel would be the name of the game killer, since he was the killer in the novels. Lo and behold, come the opening cutscene for Sister Location, we hear William Afton being questioned about his design choices with the baby animatronic, and with a single line we get name confirmation. Those weren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton, instantly confirming Matt had to be correct, and boom, you looking for this? We all got the name of the man we would one day love and hate at the same time, but mostly hate, at least in my case. And at 9, Springtrap. And since we know that William is the purple guy, well, the purple guy that's meant to represent a shadow, we know that William is the character known as Springtrap. We learned this in one of the final Between Night minigames of Fnaf 3, where we see William, after disassembling the animatronics, confronted by the souls of his child victims. However, they're, for some reason, freaking him out. I mean, like, it's understandable because, like, they're child ghosts and those are always freaky, but, like, you've already killed them once. just do it again. And in an attempt to feel more confident, or maybe to scare them away, he hops back into the golden spring-lock Bonnie suit which he used to lure the children away originally. But thanks to a leaky ceiling, the mechanisms holding the robot parts back, known as the spring locks, fail, and William gets shoved full of thousands of tiny little metal bits and robot bits. This is what we came to know as the spring locking. 30 years later, William is somehow still alive and uses the suit to hunt us down during the events of Fnaf 3's main game. And at 8, CEO. We also know for a fact, thanks to the aforementioned Silver Eyes novel and the unreleased Fnaf AR Faz facts, that William Afton was indeed the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. He also had a partner named Henry in the books, whose first official appearance in the games was in Fnaf 6. Henry's the one who delivered the final speech in that game, and this was proven thanks to the insanity ending, which ends up playing a voice recording that's labeled HRY and then a couple numbers, but HRY meaning Henry. However, as the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, or at least the co-owner, William had uninhibited access to the entire network of Fazbear locations, which is what made it so easy for him to lure kids away and to know where the best places to kill them would be. I mean, I hate to be blunt by saying that, but like saying something like knowing the best places to go and do the deed, or a similar phrase, is probably more likely to get us flagged at this point. But yeah, William Afton is the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. At 7, main antagonist. William Afton, even if he is but a single man, or I guess a single dad, more on that in a minute, he's still the driving force behind this entire series, and the main antagonist of every single game. To this day. Actually. Sure, we may have to fend off some animatronics for 6 hours, but that doesn't mean that they're the overarching antagonist to the series. None of this would be happening if it wasn't for William. It's like a D&D campaign, with William Afton being the big bad evil guy, or BBEG, while the various games and the animatronics are the individual adventures and the minions that you fight. Yes, they're also antagonists, but the big bad evil guy is the reason they're there, therefore he is the main antagonist. William, in this case, is the BBEG. Since all the animatronics got possessed because he killed the kids who possessed the suits, including his own daughter. Speaking of which, and at 6, family. Afton's family is messy business, with all of his kin meeting some kind of grisly fate. Afton is the first, since he gets spring-locked 30 years before the events of Fnaf 3, but that's game release date wise first, since in the case of the actual timeline, first up is Elizabeth Afton, who, despite her father's warnings, gets a little too close to her favorite animatronic, which ends up being Baby. However, this causes Baby's killer instinct to activate, resulting in Elizabeth getting grabbed by a giant claw, scooped, and then crushed inside the animatronic, who then she goes on to possess. However, at some point earlier, Afton's wife or baby mama or significant someone ended up dying or going missing or just leaving him. We don't really quite know what. But we can be sure that it isn't pretty, since there seems to be no references to her in any of the game. Crying Child ends up getting killed after his head gets crushed by Fredbear in 1983 and he dies in the hospital. Then William himself gets spring-locked and then burned multiple times, and then Michael gets his innards replaced with innards and turns physically purple and burns to death in the Fnaf 6 fire. There's a lot of fire in these games, and the little arsonist in me loves that. The cops are going to use these videos against me if I'm ever accused of literally anything, and I know it. Halfway through into number 5, first victim. Now the topic of who ends up really being the first victim is still debated to this day. However, there are currently 2 possibilities, so I will cover both options. The first, ironically, and the original first victim was the puppet, Charlotte, Henry's daughter. Keep in mind that Henry was William's business business partner and co-owner of Fazbear Entertainment, most likely until his daughter died. We thought the puppet was first since, well, they seemingly gave life to the other animatronics, or at least showed them how to control themselves, given that they're just intense human emotion. And the daughter of your business partner seems like a more important kill than some random kid with blonde hair. Speaking of which, the other potential first victim is Chica, Susie, who wasn't in the running until one of Withered Chica's voice lines from Ultimate Custom Night that says, "I was the first. I have seen everything." Which could mean that she was the first victim overall, but it could also simply mean that she was the first of the missing children's incident from 1985, when the original 5 animatronic victims were killed. So currently, the general consensus is that Charlotte was the first overall victim and possesses the puppet like we see in the security puppet minigame, and then Susie was the next direct victim in 1985 at what would be the start of the missing children's incident. And at 4, parallels. Now, I talked about how William's family suffered as much as they could, perhaps as a way to torture William just as much as his DNA. However, he seems to have quite a few similarities with all of his kids, especially in how his story unfolds. The first and most obvious one is that in The Man in Room 1280, the third story of the 5th Fazbear Frights book Bunny Call, we see William in a coma after the Fnaf 6 fire that was supposed to have killed him. This directly parallels to how Crying Child was in a coma post-bite in Fnaf 4. We know that he was in the hospital thanks to the IV, flower, and pill Easter eggs, and the heart monitor that stops at the end of the game. However, William also shares moments with his other kids. Elizabeth ends up getting trapped inside Baby and possesses her. William ends up getting trapped inside Spring Bonnie. And while he doesn't possess it, he does control it just by moving. Since, like how Michael is filled with Ennard and his robotic body, William was filled with the robotic bits of that Springlock suit. And, I mean, they're both purple. One is figuratively purple, that being William, but still. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Possessed. In the same novel where we learn about what happened to William after the fire, we also learn the reason this man always comes back. It's because he was possessed. The one you should not have killed from Ultimate Custom Night is not just an angry victim, but rather the spirit that's been keeping William alive this whole time in order to watch him suffer. In the book, this kid's name is Andrew, but this possession explains how William is able to survive fire after fire, being locked in a windowless and foodless room for 30 years and being shoved full of millions of robotic parts, and how literally anything that happens cannot cause him to actually die with any form of permanence. Of course, now he's sentient code, which is probably one of the scariest things imaginable. So Fnaf is about to become a sci-fi series as we try to erase every instance of him as if he was Zoloft from the MCU. I mean, like, normal sentient robots are terrifying, especially sentient AI, but sentient AI that's literally the consciousness of a serial killer targeting kids is absolutely horrific and unwarranted. And ultimately, in a number 2, had to have connections. William is a clever man, but for some reason this guy still hides the bodies in the worst places. Sure, I don't think cops would initially check animatronics for dead bodies of missing children, but when reports started coming in about them leaking mucus and blood, I think that there would be an investigation. Plus, these animatronics are on display. They're out in front of a crowd on a regular, daily basis. One thing goes wrong and everyone ends up seeing your horrible deeds. So, in my opinion, we know that William had to be paying someone off. Whether it be the police, the courts, the state, whoever it was. Someone was getting paid to leave him alone. Because cops don't just get reports of robots bleeding where some kids went missing and they never found the bodies of those kids and then just not go investigate. Plus, even if William had cleaned out the animatronics, they would still ask why they were bleeding in the first place, and then take these robots in as evidence to inspect and probably have their own robotics expert look at it just to see if they could actually have the mechanisms to leak blood from their eyes, at least if that's an excuse William used. William is a smart man, but damn, he's dumb. And dumb criminals are the ones who get caught. So the fact that he didn't get caught means he had to have some form of connection or payment plan worked out with someone. And finally, in at number 1, he planned his spree. A lot of people wrongfully assume that William Afton turned to killing in an effort to bring back his children after he saw that his daughter possessed Baby. However, thanks to the fast facts found in Fnaf AR's game files and just logic, we know that this isn't the case. Quote from the fast facts: "Some of the first animatronics built by William Afton featured claw mechanisms that were able to hide away items inside them. The only animatronics we know that are able to do this are the Funtime animatronics, and that's because of Baby. And since these these are some of the first animatronics built by Afton, we know that he always intended for kids to be able to be grabbed and stored inside these robots, which begs the question, why? Why would Afton want to start killing in the first place? It could be because of whatever happened with or to his wife, but if someone kills out of anger, they usually want to do it themselves and not with robots who do it for them. And since Baby was built with this claw mechanism in mind, he didn't know about robots getting possessed before the desire to kill reared its ugly head, because Baby was being designed with the claw that would later then cause Elizabeth to possess her. So what could be the initial trigger? We still don't know. But what we do know is that William Afton had killing in mind way before his kids entered the fray and before he found out about possession.
Number 10. Corruption. One of the things we learn in our fight against William Afton is that he seeks to corrupt other animatronics, even good animatronics like Glamrock Freddy, who is pretty much our ally throughout the game and ultimately wants to help us get out of the Pizzaplex safely. In the final boss fight, Afton in his current in-game form will attempt to take control of Glamrock Freddy, and we have to try and harm him to prevent him from doing so. You know that he was successful when Freddy's eyes glow purple. If this happens, he will attempt to harm instead of help Gregory, aka you. Number 9. An army of animatronics. While you can try to prevent Glamrock Freddy from becoming corrupted, there are some animatronics that you can't really save from Afton's influence. Eventually, Glamrock Chica, Roxanne Wolf, and Montgomery Gator will all join him in his attempt to attack Gregory. The Blob, or I guess the Freddy amalgamation if you prefer, also seems to be in league with Afton, at least initially in the game. Although they are not specifically controlled by Afton, which means they either simply want to join Afton's cause because they believe in it for some reason, or have their own reasons for lashing out at young Gregory. The other animatronics don't seem to be in control of their behavior and are more like William Afton's puppets, completely controlled and willed to cause harm by Afton himself, likely going against their own initial programming. Number 8. Hunter. While later on Afton mainly relies on his influence over the other animatronics to do his bidding, initially he was involved, possibly directly, in taking out any Fazbear employees who came to investigate just what he was up to in the tunnels below the Pizzaplex. Large quantities of power were being drained down there, and when employees were sent to investigate, none of them managed to ever return apparently. This implies that they were all killed, likely by Afton himself in his new form as Burntrap, or some lesser form of him perhaps as he bided his time becoming Burntrap, improving his appearance and gaining more and more power. Improving his appearance. Ugh. It's not really improved, he's pretty gross. And as he gained more and more power, literally with electrical power, and on an influential scale. Number 7. He survived. So obviously if you have played Security Breach or watched any of your favorite YouTubers or streamers play it at this point, you know that William Afton managed to survive and make it into the game. Not only that, but his physical body even manages to somehow be around. I know, I'm like, isn't this thing completely destroyed at this point? Apparently not. It shows up once more fused with an animatronic suit, managing to have survived all the awful things that have happened to it, like being spring-locked and burned alive. I think he was burned alive twice actually, and also possibly possessed or cursed, depending on which continuity you subscribe to. Though it should be noted that this is probably the most decayed and worse for wear we've seen William Afton look in the flesh. Number 6. Burntrap. This version of William Afton is known as Burntrap. Burntrap is an amalgamation of a bunch of different animatronics, and I believe we actually found the name Burntrap through hacking the game and through looking at the file names. Burntrap is actually a withered Spring Bonnie suit that also has endoskeleton parts from Springlock, Glamrock, and Nightmare animatronic builds as well. Of course, the corpse of William is also permanently bonded with this suit as well, and much of his corpse beneath is visible because of just how withered the suit is. Very little of the suit is still visible, and you can even see all of Afton's skeletal looking gum exposed bottom jaw, as the suit no longer has its bottom jaw attached. Ew. Number 5. Trailer lines. When fans looked into the files belonging to Burntrap within the game, they learned that there was actually a ton of content stored there that simply wasn't used at all in Security Breach, at least as far as we know right now at this moment in time when I'm recording this. However, this content was designed and programmed into his character, it just was never used. Among this content were 2 lines featured in one of the Security Breach trailers that many fans suspected belonged to William Afton himself. Well, it turns out that apparently we were right about that. However, However, while the lines were found within his files, they were never uttered in the actual game. Either they were put there with the intention of being used, but an opportunity never really presented itself that made sense, or they were used and then later they were cut from the game for some reason. Among them, I believe, was the line, "You will do as I say, you will bring me what I want, and if you fail me, then you will, both of you, burn." Unfortunate, because that line was honestly something I wanted to know more about in terms of how it played into the plot and then the overall lore of the franchise. Like, what does William Afton want? Who is burning? Which two people? Is there more than two? Number 4, the ruins. Where did William Afton as Burntrap come from? Well, it seems in the game that Vanny was tasked with recovering his body, digging up the ruins of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, which the Mega Pizzaplex happens to have built on top of. Recruiting the Glamrock animatronics against their will, she brings them to the ruins of Freddy Fazbear's and has them dig something up. Likely that something is William Afton's tattered corpse. It's gotta be really tattered at this point. That is how he is able to return with Vanny's help and some convenient construction with the Pizzaplex being built on top of the Pizza Place. Although this likely was also part of his greater plot as Glitchtrap. Fazbear may have still held the deed to that land and, they decided that they should just make use of it instead of selling that lot and then buying a new one to build on. Makes sense. Although I imagine they would have had to buy more land around it as well, because the Pizzaplex is massive. Number 3, from whence he came. While the Blob initially seems to be allied with Burntrap, as it also strikes out at Gregory, we later learn that this might not actually be the case. The Blob is the one who ends up grabbing Burntrap when he tries to escape as the cave and tunnel system begins to collapse, depending on which ending you get and what's going on. It seems the Blob either did not want to be left alone or actually has feelings of pain and vengeance attached to William Afton and Burntrap. Burntrap's fate remains uncertain, but it's definitely implied that he is killed during the cave-in, and likely so is the Blob. Of course, this is the unkillable and seemingly immortal William Afton we're talking about, so there are also many reasons to believe that this is not the end for him, as, he always comes back. Always. Number 2, death animation. While Burntrap being overtaken by the Freddy amalgamated blob / Elizabeth / just the blob, whatever you want to call it, and one of the endings seems to imply that he has died, or at the very least has been defeated, we don't actually get to see his death happen. We just see him basically pulled away by this blob as Glamrock, Freddy, and Gregory manage to escape while the underground tunnel and cave system caves in. However, through fans hacking the game, they've claimed that they have found some unused Burntrap files, and within that an unused death animation for the character. There could still be a way to unlock those unused files, of course, as it's still early days for this game, and there are likely tons of clues and hidden lore still left uncovered as of yet. After all, this game is massive, but the other option is that Burntrap's death was initially going to be shown in one of the endings, but was ultimately cut to leave it more ambiguous as to whether or not he might return, and whether or not he actually survived. Perhaps they wanted to kill him off initially, but then decided they'd rather leave the option open for Afton to return once again. I personally think they maybe were like, we could make Vanny this big character and then say goodbye to Afton, and then they got cold feet as they were getting near the end of that. They're like, oh, people won't like it if Afton's gone. Of course, all of the people that have played the game are like, more Vanny, less Afton. Number 1, no jump scare. Although all the other animatronic antagonists in Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach have their own jump scare if they manage to catch you, Burntrap is the only animatronic who doesn't seem to have one. This is likely because, well, he doesn't really catch you himself, but instead gets other animatronics to lash out at you, preferring to use them to get to you instead of pursuing you as Gregory himself. This just goes to show us how much this character has evolved and really grown in terms of his power, becoming the mastermind who pulls the strings as opposed to doing his own dirty work. And I know what you're all gonna say, he's always been the mastermind, Amanda. You're right, he has been, but I just mean, remember initially he used to kill people? That was his thing. And now he's like, nah, everyone else just kill people for me. I'm tired. I'm like, look at me, I'm barely a human anymore. I'm just a little bit of bone and a little bit of gums. That's about it. Number 10, I always come back. Well, it seems like William Afton as Burntrap may finally be gone for good. He also might not be. After all, this is William freaking Afton we're talking about here, and the guy has pretty much become immortal, in my eyes at least. He has survived being spring-locked in a spring Bonnie suit, being locked up for years, burned to a crisp, possibly being possessed or haunted by one of his victims, perhaps having his consciousness uploaded into a game, and beyond. But just because it seems like the amalgamated Freddy blob finally took him out doesn't mean that is what happened. Springtrap could have somehow escaped his seemingly deadly fate and managed to get out of the Pizzaplex. Just where he would go next and what he would get up to, we don't really know. But we know it probably wouldn't be anything good. And he's probably up to something. He's probably out there right now. Number 9. Fazbear has the blueprints. When it comes to many of the animatronics that we've encountered in this franchise, it seems to have been implied that either William Afton or his partner Henry Emily in some capacity, or some combination thereof, were the ones responsible for creating said robotic beings. Now that both Henry and William are seemingly gone, however, it is interesting to see Fazbear apparently thriving with both their own meta game that appears to exist within the universe with Help Wanted, and also with their new establishment, the Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex. Considering we also have seen new animatronics here, it must mean that Fazbear Entertainment is now the one behind making these animatronics, and it seems to be implied that as such they have secured the blueprints for the original animatronics and were able to use them to create new ones like Montgomery Gator and Roxanne Wolf. Either that or these are like old animatronics that they've updated, but I feel like it's implied that these are completely fresh, so they made them themselves. This means that William and Henry are really no longer needed with this company, although we don't know if either remains attached at all financially to Fazbear, or even attached to their founding story or their history. However, this also opens up the possibility of someone else at the head of Fazbear becoming corrupt and turning evil. Maybe there'll be a new William Afton one day. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, I don't know what else we could pull from this game about William Afton, but I'm sure there's lots of things we still haven't even found yet. Be sure to let us know you want more lists on William Afton by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Cult of Afton runs Fazbear Entertainment. Speaking of the possible ulterior motives of Fazbear Entertainment and their still possible connection to Afton and Emily, just why was the Mega Pizzaplex built on top of the ruins of another Freddy Fazbear location? While Vanny seems to be the only loyal follower of William Afton that we see in Security Breach, is it possible that there are corrupt forces working from within the Fazbear Entertainment Company, and that Vanny isn't the only one? That they are the ones who arranged it so that the Pizzaplex would be built in the first place on top of these ruins, and even placed Vanny/Vanessa there so that she could recover Afton's body in secret. I'm just saying, there are a lot of spooky coincidences that seem to have happened that seem, well, just too bizarre to actually be coincidences. Number 7. New voice actor. An interesting detail when it comes to the character's evolution in Security Breach is that it seems like Michael Curtis was going to be the voice of William Afton. From the trailers, that is what was implied. At least that's definitely what I was picking up on. And yet before, the main voice actor for William Afton, the one that we'd come to know from Sister Location at least, was PJ Haywood. The even stranger thing is if William Curtis was meant to play the role of William Afton, and the lines he uttered in the trailer, which hackers have claimed in the files are actually linked to Burn Trap within the game, then why didn't he actually get to do those lines in the games? It seems like there must have been a directional shift when it came to the content that it was suggested we were going to get. It seems, based on the trailers, that Afton, Vanny, and possibly the security guard Vanessa were all going to play more important and prevalent roles in the game. It also kind of seems like we could have gotten one of two ways, with either like Vanessa helping us or Freddy helping us. Or maybe there's a version of the game where they both help us, I don't know. And yet we didn't see as much from any of these characters as we thought we would. Or at least we didn't see what we thought we would from them. So were the whole scenes that Curtis recorded lines for tossed? Or was the direction changed much earlier on? Is Curtis's voice really even meant to be William Afton? Or is this supposed to be some other character? I know this is more questions than answers, but this is another case where knowledge kind of just leads to more theories and speculations than any correct answers. Number 6. Maybe no longer British? The really interesting thing about having William Afton potentially recast in Security Breach is that it implies that he somehow may have lost his British accent, at least based on the voice that we heard. When PJ Haywood voiced William Afton in Sister Location, he was distinctly British. This was a character who definitely had a British accent. And yet if Michael Curtis is doing a voice for William Afton in the trailer, and those unused files were found under the header of Burn Trap in the games, he somehow, I guess, lost his British accent? So is he British or is he American? or is he from somewhere else? It's possible that being burned severely might have also altered his vocal cords, or just that over time his accent diminished or changed, which can happen. I mean, after all, when we heard him in Sister Location, I think it was mainly in like flashback stuff, so I don't know, maybe it's been a long time and now all of a sudden his accent is gone. After all, dialects come from what we hear around us and are built over time through speech patterns based on those sounds. So if he had been in the US for I guess a long period of time, it is possible his voice could have changed. Then he could still be British, but you know, with an American accent, because his British accent sort of faded away. It should be noted though that the older that you are, the more unlikely it becomes that your voice would change like this. Which of course also begs the question, how old is William Afton anyways? Do we even know? Number 5. Rescued at the last moment. It's very unlikely that William Afton is actually dead. Although we talked about that being what seems to happen on the part 1 of this list, when it comes to Afton's fate and him being attacked by the Freddy amalgamated blob and pulled back deeper into the ruins as everything caved in around them, it's also just as likely that the blob was maybe saving Afton instead. After all, while the blob may be a monster, they also seemingly lashed out along with Springtrap originally, and they are after all an amalgamation of his creations. They also tried to kill Gregory. You can die from the blob. Freddy is kind of like William's child as well, and it's possible that even while horribly disfigured, they still felt an allegiance to their creator. Perhaps at the last minute the blob is trying to save Afton. Although it looks like they are pulling Springtrap further in towards this cave-in, they could also know of an escape route that was simply safer than the one Gregory and Glamrock Freddy seem to be taking, and they could be attempting to pull Afton towards safety instead so that he could escape and live another day. Although, to be honest, I feel like he's lived enough days. However, this would possibly allow Afton to return in future games. Number 4. William Afton's final creation? Where did the blob come from? Well, we don't have a concrete answer at this point, as with so many things in the FNAF lore, some fans have been pointing to the books for answers. On Reddit, one user known as Pickle Trip Jr. in the 5 Nights at Freddy subreddit responded to a post centered on the blob that was started up by user Spiritual Distance 168, where they brought up the fact that in Fourth Closet, the version that we see of William Afton there is actually experimenting with melting down the remaining animatronics and bonding them and the souls trapped within them together. He's doing this somewhere underground as well, which sounds, I don't know, pretty familiar to me based on Security Breach. If Fourth Closet is connected to this narrative, then it seems like it might be hinting that William may have actually had a hand in the creation of the blob. Either that or it's Pizzeria Simulator. I don't know. Number 3. Elizabeth Afton and William Afton team up. It's also very possible that Elizabeth Afton and William Afton have both managed to somehow live on and continue to survive. Heck, even Michael Afton could be, I don't know, mixed in there somewhere for all we know. While Elizabeth Afton was supposed to have been freed in spirit at the end of Pizzeria Simulator, the blob seems to be an amalgamation of many Freddys and all the other animatronics that were burned at the ending of that game. That would include Circus Baby as well. What if the blob struggled with whether or not to fight William, as within the tangled mess there were various consciousnesses with various allegiances, but in the end Circus Baby won out and decided to save him because she's still maybe part Elizabeth? The fact that the blob even seems to have some kind of will of its own seems to imply that the spirits within those animatronics somehow lingered and were not fully, at least, freed, which could mean we could see the return of Circus Baby teaming up with her dad in the future. Sounds terrifying. Or we could simply see a return of the blob fully amalgamated with Springtrap as well. A very permanent, kind of terrifying team up. Number 2. 99.9% immortal. At this point, I think we can say that William Afton has achieved immortal status. I'm saying it. Let's get a stamp or something for this guy. Immortal. 99.9% immortal at least. The guy has come back from everything, and even when we thought he was finally gone, he still survived via some kind of, I don't know, ID chip in a suit? Afton ends up having his soul uploaded into the game Help Wanted and is somehow able to reunite said soul with his very, very, very dead at this point, crispy and falling apart body. How do you even use that body? At this point, I'm convinced that Afton has become a supernatural being because as long as his soul or a remnant of it is still around, he just can't be destroyed. Also, how do you kill someone's soul? I don't know how to do that. That is probably the key to defeating him at this point, to be honest. But I don't know how you kill someone's soul. I don't think we've got to that point yet in these games. Number 1. More powerful than ever. The crazy thing when it comes to William Afton's appearance in Security Breach, the real crazy thing, another crazy thing I guess I should say at this point, and his move from Glitch Trap to Burn Trap is that even while in his Burn Trap form, he still seems to possess digital special powers. What does this mean? Possibly that we have an even more powerful version of William Afton on our hands moving forward. Not only is he pretty much immortal and has proven to be virtually unkillable, but now he has both digital corruption powers and also possesses a physical form. I mean, it's a rough physical form, but it's still there. We also know that William Afton is likely some kind of charming figure who can easily influence others, as this has been implied in earlier canon within the games, and in the books. I mean, he must be charming in some capacity. He ended up with kids somehow, and he also ended up as one of the heads of a successful franchise, semi-successful franchise I guess, despite being a murderer, right? How did he do that? Also, a lot of people that are serial killers tend to be like weirdly charming, so if you ever meet someone that's a little too charming, I'm just saying, watch out.